On the afternoon of May 26, 1969, there was no audience, no cameras, no spotlight, just a staircase, a single misstep, and a man collapsing in silence. This was Jeffrey Hunter, a face millions recognized, but a life almost no one truly understood. Because for nearly 30 years, he wasn't living one life. He was living two. On screen, he was everything Hollywood wanted. Composed, strong, unshakably controlled. The perfect leading man. The kind of man studios could rely on, audiences could trust, and stories could be built around without risk. But off-screen, there was another version of him. Quieter, heavier, constantly holding something back. Not hiding scandals, not running from fame, but carrying a pressure to never break. Long before Hollywood, before contracts and cameras and carefully constructed images, he was just a boy growing up in the American Midwest. A place where strength wasn't something you talked about. It was something you proved. Where pain wasn't shared. It was endured. And somewhere in those early years, he learned a rule that would follow him for the rest of his life. Control everything, or lose everything. Through football injuries, through radio performances where every mistake echoed with no chance of correction, he trained himself to stay composed, to manage every breath, every pause, every emotion, even when he wasn't steady inside. By the time 20th Century Fox signed him in 1950, he didn't just arrive with talent. He arrived already shaped. They gave him a new name, a new image, a new identity. Jeffrey Hunter. Clean, strong, reliable. And from that moment on, his life was no longer entirely his own. Film after film, he proved himself not by being loud, but by being steady. In The Frogman, in Three Young Texans, he showed something rare, not intensity but control. He didn't reach for the spotlight. He stayed grounded inside it. And that became his strength. But it also became his limitation. Because the more perfect his image became, the less space he had to be anything else. He couldn't afford to fail publicly. Couldn't afford to appear uncertain. Couldn't even change too much without risking the very thing that made him valuable. So instead of expanding, he began to divide. When he appeared in The Searchers alongside John Wayne, he didn't try to overpower the film. He balanced it, a quiet moral center in a world filled with violence and obsession. Critics noticed, audiences respected him. But respect is not the same as becoming unforgettable. And that space between recognition and legend is where he remained. Then came King of Kings. A role that should have changed everything. He played Jesus Christ with restraint, with discipline, with a calm that carried weight without force. The film reached audiences across the world. His face became known in a way it never had before. But that recognition came with a cost. Because once the world sees you as something sacred, it becomes harder to see you as anything human again. And just like that, the distance between his two lives grew wider. By the early 1960s, the split was complete. On screen, he was timeless. Off-screen, he was exhausted. Still working. Still present. But no longer moving forward in the same way. Then, in 1964, an opportunity appeared. Quiet, uncertain, easy to overlook. A television pilot. A character named Captain Christopher Pike in Star Trek. The role suited him. Thoughtful. Controlled. A man carrying responsibility without needing to dominate. But the project itself was unstable. The network wasn't convinced. A second pilot was requested. For Hunter, it wasn't just a creative decision. It was a risk, and he chose to walk away. At the time, it made sense. Television was still seen as a step down. The future of the show was unclear. There was no guarantee it would become anything at all. So he stepped back. Quietly, without hesitation, and the world moved forward without him. The role was reworked, the tone shifted, and William Shatner stepped into a new version of that same universe. What followed wasn't just a series. It became a legacy, a cultural phenomenon, a future that Hunter had stood at the edge of, but never entered. After that, nothing collapsed overnight. There was no dramatic fall, just a slow shift, He continued working, but the center had moved. The industry was changing. Audiences were changing. The kind of presence that once made him valuable now made him feel distant from the moment. New actors arrived with something different. Rougher energy, less control, more unpredictability. And the man who had mastered discipline found himself out of place in a world that no longer rewarded it the same way. His personal life began to reflect the same quiet strain. Relationships formed, then slowly drifted. Not because of conflict, but because of distance. Because it is difficult to build closeness with someone who has spent a lifetime learning how not to reveal too much. He wasn't breaking apart. He was holding too much in. In 1968, during a film shoot, something happened that seemed minor at the time. A glass window shattered incorrectly. The impact was sudden. A concussion. Disorientation. He recovered, at least on the surface. But not everything shows itself immediately. Months passed. Work continued. Life moved forward. Until one quiet afternoon. It didn't. On May 26, 1969, while descending a staircase, his body gave way. An internal hemorrhage. A fall. A moment that no one could reverse. By the next morning, Jeffrey Hunter was gone. He was 42. No spectacle. No final scene. No dramatic ending. Just silence. And maybe that's the part that stays with you. He didn't live a double life in the way people expect. There were no hidden scandals. No secret identities. Just a man who spent decades becoming someone the world could accept, while quietly moving further away from who he was. He didn't disappear because he failed. He disappeared because he never allowed himself to fully exist. And in the end, there was no great collapse. Just a quiet ending. The same way he had lived all along.